Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second Adaptation plus Mitigation Nexus webinar. This is the webinar on the Nexus in the built environment. And again, my name is Shauna Udvardi. I'm the Climate Adaptation Policy Analyst with the Center for Clean Air Policy. And we're really excited to have you here today with us on this webinar. Wanted to give a little bit of background on AMNex and talk to you a little bit about the purpose and then introduce the speakers. So the Adaptation plus Mitigation Nexus Affinity Group sits under the broader National Climate Assessment Network of partner organizations, and it extends the National Climate Assessment process and products to a broader audience. The purpose of AMNex, the Adaptation plus Mitigation Nexus Group, is to conduct research on, provide guidance for, and encourage implementation of integrative adaptation and mitigation practices. This work will help to inform the National Climate Assessment's focus on evaluating progress on both climate adaptation and mitigation. The membership of AMNex spans across federal, state, and local government agencies, nonprofit organizations, private sector organizations, and university institutions. Today we have about 70 folks representing these agencies and organizations, and we're really happy to have such a great turnout. This webinar series was kicked off in January of 2014, and it brings together experts in the field to discuss research plans to help illustrate the benefits of climate adaptation and mitigation, while also keeping an eye on the potential conflicts that arise between these two, integrating these two areas. So again, today we're very pleased to welcome our speakers. We have three experts that will be joining and helping to lead the discussion on adaptation plus mitigation in the built environment. I'm going to go ahead and introduce all three speakers at once, and then I'll turn it over to our first speaker. And we'll go ahead and take questions at the end. We're hoping to have a really robust discussion at the end. But if you do have clarifying questions, my co-lead here, Emily Seiler, will be able to handle those during the presentation or after each presentation. So our first speaker, we're going to go ahead and dive in with Chris Pike. Chris is the Vice President of Research for the U.S. Green Building Council. In this role, he directs a diverse research portfolio leveraging green building project experience to gain practical insights into building performance, occupant experience, and market trends. This includes leading the development and operation of the Green Building Information Gateway, a unique global data platform for the green building industry. Chris serves in a number of technical advisory roles, including representing the United States on green gas mitigation issues related to residential on the IPCC Working Group 3. He is also a faculty member at George Washington University, teaching in the Graduate Sustainable Urban Planning Program. Today, Chris will discuss the important role that building certification programs play in promoting energy efficiency and resilience. So our second speaker is Christopher Lindsay. Christopher Lindsay is the Manager of Government Relations for the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials Group. Christopher is based here in Washington, D.C. In his role, he works to develop and pursue the association's growing legislative and regulatory agenda. Mr. Lindsay's experience includes serving in the lead White House office for nonprofit policy issues. In this capacity, he played a pivotal role analyzing data and reporting trends on more than 25,000 nonprofits that partner with the federal government. More recently, as the Director of Programs for ESFI International, he worked with the United States leading manufacturers certification labs, retailers, and distributors on advocating for issues of importance to the electrical industry, including safety and efficiency. So Christopher is going to speak today about the importance of jurisdictions adopting strict codes and standards that go beyond baseline standards. And our final speaker is Deborah Ballin. We're really excited to have her here with us today. She is the General Counsel and Senior Vice President for Public Policy at the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety. Deborah joined IBHS in 2008 and is responsible for managing all of the organization's legal matters, overseeing IBHS public policy efforts. In addition, she also serves as the organization's corporate secretary. Previously, Deborah served as the Executive Vice President of Public Policy Management for the American Insurance Association. She developed and implemented policy for AIA's priority federal and state public policy issues. She also served on the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development on their high-level advisory board for financial management of large-scale catastrophes with a heavy emphasis on mitigation. So Deborah is going to speak today on IBHS's Fortified program and standards, and also discuss the new Resilient STAR program. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Chris Pike, and Chris will start us off. Thank you.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. So let's see if I can get this to go. All right. So my name is Chris Pike, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and to get us going. And I'm going to focus my remarks for the next few minutes on the nexus between the role that green building plays in both greenhouse gas mitigation and adaptation, and more broadly, resilience to changing climatic conditions. And just so that we're on the same page, I represent the U.S. Green Building Council, and we're a DC-based nonprofit. And in our role, we represent 13,000 member organizations. These range from small mom-and-pop architecture firms up through federal agencies and all points in between, and major companies. We also work through 77 chapters across the U.S. and with 190,000 accredited professionals. And our goal in all cases is to create buildings and communities that benefit people and the environment. So as a place to start, what I'd like to do is remind everybody about the kind of essentially our theory of change. How do we believe that we influence the design of the built environment to be a positive factor with regard to greenhouse gas emissions or resilience? And in a sense, it's actually pretty simple. We as a movement have adopted the idea that in the world there exists a distribution of practice on any performance dimension, be it greenhouse gas emissions, resilience, human health, or materials transparency. And we understand that what we are trying to do is accelerate the adoption of practices from innovators into market leaders, and by providing recognition and guidance and so forth, create a permanent and self-sustaining shift in prevailing market practices. So our goal is to shift the entire body of practice within the real estate segments, within the property segments that we operate in. And our devices for moving this curve, for moving the market, are at least threefold. One, our goal is to create a cadre of professionals with a common technical vocabulary and understanding, and that today is represented by the 190,000 or so folks who carry these credentials. We also create tools, and many of you know us from our work with the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design rating system. I'll be talking specifically about how we use tools like LEED, and then through processes to document and verify and reward leadership. So just putting in the broadest context, our goal is market transformation. Our goal is to change the prevalence of practice at the scale of the entire industry. Our tools are professionals, rating systems, and processes generally. And so it's also critical to note that when we talk about this work, we envision working across the entire life cycle of the built environment. So our goal is to work from the scale of neighborhoods, tens, hundreds, thousands of acres, into individual new construction projects, changing the way we design and build our homes, offices, schools, and so forth, changing the way we operate existing buildings, and actually changing the way we fit them out in the details, so even all the way into interiors and homes. And just as one last bit of foundation, it's important the remarks I'm going to share with you in a minute are predicated under just a little bit of understanding about what a green building rating system is. So I mentioned to you earlier that one of our roles is to create a rating system. Well, a rating system is a tool for defining different practices that constitute superior performance and providing recognition against that standard. So getting one level deeper, the structure of a rating system today, in the case of LEED, is that generally a rating system is composed of two kinds of elements. It's composed of prerequisites and that every project must do, and then credits, which are variable elements that projects must accumulate a certain number of credits to achieve certification. These prerequisites and credits are in turn mapped to different outcomes they are intended to promote, such as greenhouse gas mitigation or human health promotion or stormwater runoff avoidance. So essentially a rating system becomes a matrix of prerequisites and credits that are associated to varying degrees with different outcomes. So in the remainder of these remarks, I'm going to focus on two specific outcomes out of many. So if you look on your screen, you should see a stack of outcomes. These are outcomes that we have been pursuing for years in terms of the different objectives of green building. They include addressing climate change writ large, addressing things like the indoor environment, and various other outcomes such as human health or eutrophication. In the case of this conversation, we're really focused on climate change, and we're focused on two dimensions, one being mitigation and the other being adaptation. So the longest standing focus of the green building community has clearly been on greenhouse gas mitigation. And for years, when we said climate change, that's what we meant. And so one technical manifestation of that interest is that we can look at, and we have, at every single credit in a green building rating system and evaluate its relative strength or relative value for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And so, for instance, if I took a typical office building in a suburban setting like this, and I have to understand how it's used, what its schedule is, how people get there, how it's where we use water and so forth. If I take that information into account, I can identify in a rating system 27 different discrete interventions that I can make that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, ranging from changing the location of the building with respect to commuting patterns, altering carpooling, transportation demand management, into energy efficiency, on-site renewables, water conservation, and supply chain management. And critically, what I can do is these are all these elements of green building today that we understand how they address greenhouse gas emissions, and we can prioritize their relative impact for a specific building under a specific set of circumstances. We can then use that information to prioritize, to direct the role of green building as a greenhouse gas mitigation strategy. So if we do that, we also, and this is slightly more technical, is that we can actually score of those strategies that are available for of those interventions that are associated with greenhouse gas reduction, how many of them are being used by projects around the world. So today we have certified about 20,000 projects, and for each of them we can have an estimate of the available palette of interventions related to GHG emissions. What is the uptake of absorption rate of those? And I can characterize that as distributions. So if a score of 50 would mean that projects are using 50% of the available greenhouse gas strategies. And I just wanted to illustrate to you that in large numbers, when we look at thousands and thousands of LEED projects are using, they follow a distribution. Some are using only a couple. Many are using about 50% of the available strategies. And then there is a long tail, and very, very few projects, essentially none, are doing everything they possibly could. That's not the world we live in. But in this example, we see a distribution, and we see in one time period, this is the blue, we see a certain level. And then a couple of years later, we see the market adopting more of those strategies. There's a small 5% shift toward a higher adoption rate. So the take-home message from this is there are dozens of greenhouse gas mitigation strategies that are commonly in use for green building. We are gradually shifting the market toward absorbing more of those strategies, and in so doing, making green building a more effective mitigation strategy. There's also more we could do by directing people or encouraging them to adopt some of of these underutilized green building strategies for mitigation. So with that in mind, let's look at the other side of the coin. So as I mentioned before, for a long time when we said, when the green building community said climate change, we meant greenhouse gas emission reduction, and consequently we have dozens of strategies. Over the last couple of years, we have gotten more interested in expanding that definition of climate change to resilience and adaptation. And just to give you a sense of why this matters, many of you may initially think of the kind of the obvious connections like floodplain avoidance or coastal setbacks, and we do consider those issues. But I think for our stakeholders, some of the most interesting issues have to do with the way that climatic information is literally embedded in the design of buildings and in their operation. And as a general rule, buildings are engineered for historic conditions. In other words, when you're building a building, even though you're building a building to last for decades into the future, we are essentially building it while looking out of the rear view mirror of our car. We're looking at the road that we just traveled down. And this is important because buildings are tuned to the climate, to a specific climatic condition. And if you take as an example the relationship between building energy use and temperature, you find that these relationships are complex and nonlinear. And so to give you an example, if we look at the aggregate behavior of energy demand from commercial buildings in Los Angeles as a function of air temperature. So along the x-axis of this diagram, I have average daily air temperature, and on the y-axis we have daily energy demand in terms of purchased electricity. And what you can see is that the building stock, not any particular building, but the building stock of all of Los Angeles at relatively low temperatures, energy use is slightly reduced, and then in a mid-range, energy response is relatively flat with respect to temperature. And as temperature begins to climb, we have a nonlinear increase in energy demand. And obviously we put certain thresholds into play by saying as that energy demand goes up, we have an energy demand that triggers concerns with regard to air quality regulations and other factors. It's not just cost, for instance. And so the point I'd like to make is that we build our buildings to be non-responsive, in other words, operating within expectations within a certain range of temperature. As the temperature climbs outside of that design range, that the energy cost, the greenhouse gas emissions, and the environmental damages go up non-linearly. This is not, the critical issue is, this is not an inherent characteristic of buildings. We design, in aggregate, the building stock to behave this way. We are perfectly capable of building a building stock that is much less responsive and that is, or perhaps is flatter over a wider range of conditions. This is one example of many where climatic information is embedded. In this case, we literally design buildings around a certain climatic regime. When we go out of that regime, we have nonlinear responses that degrade performance in ways that we find unsatisfying. We could look at many, many other examples. So I'll close by offering a couple of practical tools that we've been working on in recent years. So recently, in the last couple of years, we have been trying to empower our green building stakeholders with tools to both advance mitigation, of which there are lots of tools, as I showed you earlier, prioritizing strategies based on certain building types, and tracking performance over time, but increasingly with regard to adaptation and resilience. And so one of the most practical tools, we conducted some work with the University of Michigan, and we created climate resilience guidelines for many credits in LEED rating systems. And so you can have a link for you at the end to download a document where you can find credit by credit guidance. So each of those individual elements of LEED, we broke them down, talked about what they were trying to achieve, looked at what was the effect of a changing climate on the performance of these credits, on how you might achieve them. We identified these embedded climate sensitivities, and we described specific adaptive opportunities available in carrying out the credits. So there's dozens and dozens of these that are available for use, and I'll explain that in a minute. And so most recently, over the last year, we have turned those qualitative design guidelines into a little bit more of a quantitative. So I'm going to show you some screenshots in a second from something we call the LEED Resilience Screening Tool. And the goal here is twofold. One, we want to identify individual credits in different life cycle phases, neighborhoods, new construction, existing buildings, and homes, where the performance of a credit, of a criteria or an intervention, are dependent on climate conditions, just like we outlined in some cases in the design guidelines. And we also wanted to identify specifically for which credits are there adaptive opportunities. In other words, in the typical implementation, are there opportunities where we could make specific changes to make the project more resilient? And so what's available today, I'll give you a link at the end to download an Excel tool that allows us to screen credits based on their sensitivities and adaptive opportunities. And I'll give you 2 quick snapshots. So looking at the realm of new construction, this is new commercial construction, we're able to score every credit in the rating system as either not sensitive to changing climate conditions, and there are plenty of things that are not sensitive, and to identify, say, 15% of the criteria, the interventions, where climate is baked in, and allows us to focus on those. There is also a larger set of criteria where there are adaptive opportunities, and I would underscore this point. There are criteria, there are interventions in LEED for which climate considerations are baked in, and consequently we have created sensitivities if future conditions do not match our assumptions. On the other hand, there are a larger group of criteria for which, hey, they're going to perform just fine under future climate conditions. But if we thought about them in a different way, we would be able to make the structure more resilient to future conditions. And so it's an interesting story where there are sensitivities, there's also a larger group of opportunities. And it's critical to note that because each rating system is tailored to the set of decisions available at each moment, new construction being different from, for instance, neighborhood design, the number of sensitive interventions, credits, it varies. So in the case of neighborhood development, where we're dealing with a larger spatial scale, a different set of interventions around location, infrastructure, and site design, we have a larger set of sensitivities and a larger set of adaptive opportunities. So to close out my intro remarks, I'd like to leave you with just 3 take-home messages. I'd like you to remember that green building is a collection of targeted market interventions that are designed specifically to accelerate that permanent market shift we talked about in the beginning. We understand that dozens of those strategies can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, from transport, from water, waste, and other sources. We know we can do that. And the types of guidance that I just laid out for you, we can also understand climate sensitivities that are baked into design and take action to promote resilience to future conditions. So if you'd like to know more about any of these, I would commend to you a report we released, the University of Michigan report I mentioned on green building and climate resilience. You can download it from this link here. You can also download your own copy of the climate resilience screening tool from this link here, and you're welcome to contact me at either of the following ways. So I appreciate the chance, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue.
Chris, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And as I said, we're going to hold off on questions. So everyone, please make sure you note them so we can have a robust discussion at the end. And with us, I want to turn it over to Christopher Lindsay.
The conference has been muted.
And we'll go ahead and hear Christopher's presentation. Thank you.
Well, perfect. Pleasure to be here with everyone today. I appreciate you taking time around your lunch hour to discuss about these important issues. So as Shauna mentioned, let's see here, I'm going to advance the... Perfect, there we go. As Shauna mentioned, I work in the DC office of the IAPMO group, and just to kind of lay out kind of the key points that I'd like to discuss in our conversation today. First, I intend to kind of give you, for those who aren't aware, a brief overview of what the IAPMO group is and the role that we play in the plumbing, mechanical, and parts of the solar industry. I want to talk quickly, just to highlight briefly, a couple aspects of the energy-water nexus that are relevant to our discussion today. And then we'll talk certainly about stretch codes as an important tool in mitigation and adaptation strategies. And then, of course, part of what we do is it's not only in the codes and standards development, it's all about how these tools are implemented and enforced. And it's about empowering decision makers, at that point where they're making those decisions. And then, of course, we want to highlight a couple, policies where we think more can be done to promote research in this area and increase advanced technology. The IAPMO group is a large organization. You can see on the left then kind of our different operating units. And I'm really going to focus on three core activities for us today. First is that codes and standards development. Second is education and training of the workforce. And third is the product testing and certification. I'm willing to bet, particularly on the product testing and certification, while many of you may not know the IAPMO group, may not be a household name. However, you probably all have products or use plumbing products that bear our mark on it today. We are a 501c3 trade association, and we do represent significant portions of kind of the plumbing, mechanical, and solar industries. We do have a worldwide presence, and you can see where kind of our offices are located, as well as the countries in green are jurisdictions that have actually used or have adopted part of our regulations into their laws. Now, as we start talking about the water energy nexus, we're fortunate that in the last decade there's been an increased understanding that water uses energy and energy uses water. And so we've come to an understanding that saving water really does save energy. And of course, we do have an incomplete picture of this, and more research needs to be done. But I wanted to highlight two studies that were done that are relevant to our discussion. First comes from in 2005 with the California Energy Commission, which found that water-related energy use consumes 19% of the state's electricity. And the second one, of course, from the River Network, where it found that, of water-related carbon emissions, 70% of that was attributed just to water heating itself. So certainly how water is used in the built environment plays a role in our mitigation. And then with the upcoming release of the National Climate Assessment, I pulled out the recent picture from the U.S. Drought Monitor. Of course, having grown up out west, water stresses are issues that we've dealt with in the past, and we know that we will continue to deal with in many of our communities in more severe forms. Of course, you can't talk about. Sorry about the slide, how this one came out. As we look at the water picture and water in our drinking water systems, it's helpful to discuss first off, the lost water due to America's aging infrastructure, and then we're talking real water loss in the non-revenue water side. We're essentially leaking water and thus energy into the ground. You can see that the American Society of Civil Engineers releases their report card annually, and it gives America a D. So we support more investment. We support more opportunities for financing to help repair this aging infrastructure, so we aren't just losing that water and energy. But now let's get into the built environment. As all of you know, buildings, homes, they're all done by the private sector, and so really the opportunities for policies that jurisdictions have is to regulate these areas is through codes and standards. The IAPMO group focuses particularly on the plumbing sector. You can see a number of our different codes that we produce, anything from the Uniform Plumbing Code, mechanical codes, solar codes. We get into swimming pools, spas, and hot tubs, anywhere where water is used in the built environment. And then, of course, we're not only focused on these issues domestically, but also internationally. And our hope is that, while codes have come a long way in the last few decades in not only addressing public health and safety, but also in increasing efficiency, that we can take these gains and help developing countries skip the learning curve that we've experienced over the last 90 years. Even just kind of looking at how codes have advanced in our own country, if you were to take a 1992 plumbing code versus a 2012, you will see automatically between those two codes a 40% increase in water savings. So we are certainly progressing in water and energy efficiency, particularly as we use water in the built environment. Now, it's important also to recognize that all of our codes and standards are developed in a process that's certified by the American National Standards Institute. Now, what that does for us is it ensures that it's an open consensus process where all the major stakeholders in the industry have a say in how these codes are developed and what goes into the codes. It helps us to create a level of credibility and a buy-in from the industry. So as these model provisions are put out, and then adopted by jurisdictions, at the state and local level, they really do have kind of the industry's, gold seal or the best practices that are being put forward. And then as we talk about even baseline codes, one of the major concerns that that we have even right now is helping jurisdictions to adopt the most recent version of codes. Model codes are updated every 3 years, but every state and locality is on their own cycle for how they then adopt those provisions into their own regulations. And unfortunately, we're seeing an increasing trend in states where they're looking to delay their adoptions, either going from a 3 to a 6 year cycle, or some even later. And of course, this discourages implementation of more advanced technologies, and then also we're just missing out on those efficiencies as new infrastructure is being built. And then moving into what is a stretch code. Of course, a stretch code is almost like it's a tool that can be used to lay on top of baseline codes. It includes more efficient provisions so that jurisdictions who are looking to do more in terms of in water efficiency as it relates to kind of plumbing and mechanical applications, they can adopt extra provisions. And one of the things that we're seeing even from this most recent, the 2012 Green Plumbing and Mechanical Code Supplement, is that by jurisdictions that adopt that see a 35% additional savings on water over baseline provisions. So there are tremendous resources that are even currently available right now for jurisdictions to adopt and be able to implement and enforce to help them reduce water usage in the built environment and thus save energy. Real quickly, this is a turnkey document, so regardless of what provisions are being used by that jurisdiction, this is something that would play very well with it. And it covers both commercial and residential buildings. And it gets into a number of different topics, anything from plumbing fittings and fixtures to alternate water source use and getting into gray water. It gets good landscape for irrigation and swimming pool and decorative water features and so forth. And also I should highlight, one of the things that we're very supportive of are programs such as EPA's WaterSense. Now, right now, this is a voluntary program that was launched by EPA back in 2006, and its whole focus was to reduce municipal water use around the country. And it was just a simple way for consumers to identify products that at that time used 20% less water and performed well. And so as you go into any sort of the box retailer, major retailer stores, you can look for this mark on those products. And it's something that, for us, it's a matter of also encouraging just consumers to be aware that this label and this program is out there. Certainly on the policy side, this is something that we advocate for. This is a program, while it's voluntary, it receives a tremendous support from the industry. It's not authorized by legislation. And so it's something that we're constantly working with Congress to hopefully make this more of a kind of a permanent focus of our policy. And then getting into education and training. Education and training have been a core aspects of what IAPMO has done for over our last 90 years. We're very concerned about how anything that goes with the design, installation, maintenance of plumbing and mechanical systems in the built environment. And today I'm just going to highlight one of those training programs. And this one's actually kind of unique in that it really is really geared more towards, it's outward facing. It's geared towards those that interact with consumers in their own homes. And it's our Green Plumbers program. And again, it's designed to train, as you go in your home, as you look to address, water efficiency provisions, who is there to, who do you consult with? Usually when you have some sort of issue, you call a plumber, right? They're the first ones there, and they're the ones who are going to help you, understand what can be done in your home in terms of latest technology or updates, practical appliances, and, installation, and really help you to make those changes. What we found that each and every accredited green plumber can have an immediate impact on water conservation and energy reduction by helping. The whole focus is to help property owners make more informed decisions. This is a program that was actually taken from Australia and as part of our worldwide operations. And as of January of last year, there were more than 9,000 plumbers representing over 3,400 businesses that had completed one or more of the Green Plumbers training sessions. And what we've seen is just tremendous savings already, with water use in some areas been reduced up to 50% since 2001. Australia obviously leads the way, is a great leader in dealing with water efficiency. Now, what does this training cover? And of course, for a plumbing aspect, it talks about caring for our water, talking about these water efficient products, the newer technology. It introduces kind of water audits. In climate care, it gets into hot water heating, energy consumption in the home, and obviously all the appliances that go along with that. And it gets into more options in terms of water efficient technology with the reuse and recycled water. We've seen a rise in new communities with purple pipe. It gets into rainwater catchment systems and gray water, and then getting into the solar hot water systems, and getting into solar thermal and geothermal type applications. And really where the real bang for the buck comes from is this particular module, which is the inspection report service, which gets into helping the consumer or the building operator understand, go walk through a water and energy related audits. And this is where you really get into the dollar and cents of, by making certain changes, here are the long-term savings for you as a building or a homeowner. And take this out, and what we'd like to do is take this out into kind of how this reaches consumers in their homes when they're making these decisions. A survey of plumbing contractors found that they responded to about 3 calls per day. And so as Green Plumbers, we work to train about 1,500 plumbers in your area, times the 2.8 calls per day. We're able to touch about 4,200 houses a day and helping them at the point where they're looking to make decisions. And of course, this gets into, as you expand that out further, about 1 million houses per year. And we're able to find if the plumber is able to save just 20 gallons of water per house per day, the savings over a course of a year, equates to, 7,358,000,000 gallons of water every year. So there's just tremendous potential that can be found as we look to address these issues, and as we work to create a more informed workforce. Moving forward, we understand that there are continued research needs. One thing that we've seen across the industry is that there's a need to better understand how water is used in the built environment. We simply do not have the grasp that we would like. And this is something that was brought out at a DOE meeting recently on water heating. It's something in our conversations with DOD. They have the same concerns as well. And to that point, the industry founded a private initiative called the Plumbing Efficiency Research Coalition, which is designed to focus on, at least begin working on these issues. One of their first approaches was looking at, actually something very practical. How much water can you take out of a, plumbing system before, solid objects, our waste stops moving? So as we look to go to more efficient toilets and so forth, we eventually hit that sweet spot where our gravity-fed systems just stop. And so we're looking to identify kind of where that sweet spot is. And then even in a larger scale, there was a formula called Hunter's Curve, which was developed by a brilliant NIST scientist back in the 1930s. And it's a very complex approach, but it's all about sizing of plumbing systems as you get into the built environment and into large-scale buildings and so forth. And unfortunately, our water usage has changed over the decades, but that formula has not. And so there are some estimates that say that because of it hasn't been updated, we're oversizing systems by up to about 25%, which is a tremendous loss in the resources that we're putting into these buildings and the energy that's being used to heat water and it's being lost behind the walls. So there's great opportunities that can be used for very practical research that would have immediate impact in this sector. And then second of all, we recognize the important role that advanced technologies play. And to that point, we're one of 8 sponsoring organizations that co-convenes every 2 years what we call the International Emerging Technology Symposium. And so this next one will be held here in DC on April 23rd and 24th. And it really highlights advances in technology related to water and energy efficiency, water reuse, solar and other renewable energies, advances in mechanical system. It really brings it's a gathering of all the experts and technical experts who work in this area. And the whole focus is about in supporting wide-scale adoptions of newer technologies, as well as decreasing the cost of these technologies. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to highlight the role that water conservation plays in the built environment, and some strategies and resources that are out there. And of course, if you have any questions, we'd love to be able to help you out with that, and my contact information is there on the slide. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christopher. That was very informative. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Deborah Ballin. Deborah?
The conference has been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I've just been unmuted, so hopefully you can hear me.
We can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this. This is really a huge issue for us at IBHS, and we're just so happy to be part of this adaptation plus mitigation debate. I'm also really glad today that I was the last speaker. First of all, because I learned so much from Chris and Christopher, but second of all, because the themes that they talked about are really the same themes that we have been thinking about for a long time. And those include, how do you create market demand, and how do you shift or increase market demand so that plays an important role in getting us to where we need to be in terms of resilience or adaptation. Second, the ongoing need for codes and standards. Market demand is great, and I'm going to talk about what we're doing to create market demand, but at the same time we recognize that codes and standards provide baseline. Christopher talked about stretch codes as well, but certainly a baseline level of protection. Third, the importance of the built environment to all of this. And when we talk about the built environment, we're talking about some of the infrastructure issues, but also every home and every business that together creates the communities that we are trying to make more resilient. Fourth, the importance of enforcement and training to go along with the standards that we're talking about, whether they're legal standards or aspirational standards. And finally, I think all of our organizations are all about research, innovation, and technology, and how important all those things are. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about IBHS first, and then talk about some of the things that we are doing in this space. The Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety is a 501c3 organization. We are sponsored and supported by the property insurance industry. We've been around since 1979. And throughout that period, we've been dedicated to research and communications that really help standard setters, code setters, as well as individuals and public policymakers to understand and hopefully take the actions that are necessary to strengthen homes, businesses, and communities against natural disasters and other causes of loss. Christopher, we do talk a lot about toilets, leaking toilets. That's an issue for us in terms of water damage, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm really going to focus on that natural disaster issue, and particularly how it relates to adaptation and resiliency needs. Our gem, the thing that we are so proud of, is our research center that is located in South Carolina. Here's a screenshot of it. And if you look at those sort of circles off to the right, those are all fans that are capable of generating wind speeds, if they're all on and they're all up, roughly equivalent to a Category 3 hurricane in terms of the gust winds that are associated with that. What they do is that there's also a very large test chamber with a turntable where we could put a 1 or a 2-story specimen, and we take the wind and we put bad things onto the structures. Wind is really the driving force of so many different types of natural disasters, whether it's just straight wind, whether it's wind that's associated with rain in the case of a hurricane, whether that's wind that brings in hail, or whether that's wind that's really the driving force of wildfires. The damage that's done by wildfires to urban structures in that so-called WUI zone is not the fire itself. It's generally windborne embers. So at our test center, we are able to use that wind through a really rigorous verification process. We have recreated these natural perils, and we apply them to different types of residential and commercial structures. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the videos today, but if you go into our website, www.disastersafety.org, you can look at those or get in touch with me and we'll figure out a way that you can see some of those if you haven't been able to do that. So we're here to talk about the words adaptation and mitigation. And as I said, this is something we've been talking about for a long time. We were a little less technical than some of you who are on the phone when we first started thinking about this. And we talked about marrying the concepts of going green and building strong. We start from the building strong side. That's the work that IBHS does. We were well aware of the increasing interest in going green, the important interest in going green. And I think first we wanted to make sure that going green was not done at the expense of building strong. That those who were, whether it was the U.S. Green Building Council and other organizations, were aware that the actions that were taken for energy efficiency and other green goals didn't come at the expense of building structures that would fall down in the face of wind or be less fire resistant, et cetera. And so we started a dialogue a number of years ago just to try to marry these concepts. But what's happened in the interim is that the climate change debate increasingly has recognized the dual goals, as Chris said, of adaptation and mitigation, that those who are concerned about sustainability understand that resilience must be part of that, and ultimately that if we're going to lower environmental impacts, we also have to lower the impacts of the environment on what it is that we build. And our focus at IBHS, as I said, is on the built structures. And they're in a very important part of how we adapt. There are issues involving natural barriers. There are issues involving farming. There are a lot of issues. There are issues involving wildlife. But we can't forget about the fact that if we don't protect the people who are living and working in our communities as part of that adaptation, then we have not, I think, achieved our overriding goals. So Christopher talked about codes, and they are near and dear to our hearts at IBHS. And you did a great job, Christopher, of explaining what codes are. But we found that when we talk about building codes, a lot of eyes sometimes glass over. And people don't exactly understand what we're talking about when we talk about a building code or the code cycle or the importance of the various code-setting organizations. So we decided to do a Rating the States report where we actually looked at the quality of codes, the quality of code enforcement, and the quality of the contractor and subcontractor licensing in the 18 most hurricane-prone states. And we assigned a score to each of those. And what we found was that a lot of people that didn't necessarily understand what a building code was understood that it's always good to have a high score and it's not good to have a low score. So really this is an effective communication tool to sort of underscore the importance of codes and standards, and the way we set this up to explain how states can improve their codes and standards so that they can move themselves up on this score. And the most recent evidence that we had of that, very proud of the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, Mississippi actually adopted its first state building code. So they will, in our next report, move up from that lowly 4 to a higher score. And part of that, I think, is an understanding not only that codes are important, but that they're important throughout the state, as was not the case previously understood in Mississippi. I think there's someone speaking. If you could mute your line, please. We're hearing a conversation. If it's possible to mute your line, that would be great. And the reason that we are doing this, as we talk about when we talk about building strong, is that we have evidence that if homes and businesses, buildings cannot withstand natural disasters, first place they wind up is in a landfill. And that certainly is not consistent with going green. We have some statistics from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, just following floods. We have statistics from Haiti. We have statistics from Hurricane Sandy about the tremendous amount of debris that winds up in landfills following disasters, and the tremendous energy and natural resources that are associated with rebuilding areas that had they not fallen down to begin with, we wouldn't have these problems. So a couple of the initiatives that we're involved in to try to make this case. We talked a few minutes ago about building codes, and there is in fact a piece of legislation in Congress right now called the Safe Building Code Incentive Act, and it is designed to incentivize states to strengthen their codes. You've got to have a good statewide code in place. You've got to have an enforcement mechanism in place. And the carrot in this case would be more Stafford Act funding following a disaster. The idea being that if you've taken action in advance to reduce the likelihood of needing it, you get a reward and you can rebuild even stronger in the future. And that's certainly something that we can talk about, this and other potential incentives when we get to the question period. So that sort of falls into the code piece of it that Christopher was talking about. Moving more into the aspirational standards, we have developed our own program for both new residential construction, residential retrofitting, and we've got another program called Fortified for Safer Business. It's a combination of a rigorously tested set of technical standards as well as an inspection and verification process. And at the end of the process, if you design it and construct it correctly, you will get a fortified designation. And whether that's similar to the LEED designation, our fortified home program actually has bronze, silver, and gold standards. So that is similar to LEED, having different levels. And I love learning about this Water Sense program, which is a water related one. So I think in all of these, the idea is to provide recognition, in some cases incentives, in some cases recognition, and we're working towards those incentives, again, so that people go beyond the requirements of the code so that we begin to get the market demand for doing more. And the reason we're doing this is that we do have evidence that codes are important, but going above code can get you to an even better place in terms of resilience. Unfortunately, the caption didn't come out here, but this was the Bolivar Peninsula prior to Hurricane Ike. And coincidentally, there was a builder that had built a small community of 20 homes to our fortified standards, including, as you can see here, the importance of elevation. And as many of you know, that turned out to be the target of Hurricane Ike. And as we knew that storm was really making a bead right on Galveston and the Bolivar Peninsula, we thought that this was a great research opportunity. Let me add, we crossed our fingers and said we certainly hope that the research will come out the way we think it will, which is that these homes will withstand the storm. And you can see that most of them did. In a peninsula where virtually everything was leveled, we had more than 10 of our homes, I think it was 13 of the homes, withstood the storm. They all withstood the floodwaters, which I think is extremely important when we talk about adaptation and when we talk about the NFIP. None of those homes were destroyed by flood. The elevation clearly did what it was supposed to do. Where we lost a few, and you can see a few gaps here, was that there was so much debris from some of the other homes that had been completely devastated and destroyed by the winds. Some of them actually became windborne debris that took out a few of the homes that were in this fortified community. But this set of homes performed better than anything else in that area, and was really a testament to the fact that if you, in this case, build it stronger and build it higher, you will have a home to come back to. The problem that we see here, and I think it does relate to adaptation, is that you will have a home to come back to, but you will not have a community to come back to. And that's why it becomes so important that this concept of fortification is not just something that we can get individual homeowners, one here, one there, a few sort of really enlightened individuals understand the importance of putting in really not that much additional money, but some additional money to get it done, because if everyone around them doesn't, the community still can die following an event like Hurricane Ike, or certainly some of the other ones that we're well aware of in terms of the named storms. So we've had the Fortified Home Program for quite a number of years. And very recently in September, there was announced by DHS a new partnership between IBHS and DHS to the Department of Homeland Security to develop the Resilience Star program. Sounds familiar like Energy Star. That's exactly the point of trying to sort of take advantage of the knowledge that people already have about Energy Star, which sort of comes from the green side, and turn that into Resilience Star, which here is on our adaptation side. The DHS folks spent a couple of years looking for standards and ultimately came up with on the home side that the only program that they felt at this time was appropriate to be included in Resilience Star was our Fortified for Safer Living, our Fortified New Construction, our Fortified Retrofit programs. Because the technical standards themselves had been fully vetted. In fact, FEMA had vetted them in a different context in Mississippi. And B, because of this verification process. There was confidence that if a home actually received the designation, it wasn't just a lot of talk about doing the right thing. We had inspectors who were there at the right times to make sure that that actually did happen. So the program was announced in September. We are now in a piloting stage, mostly in the Gulf Coast at this point, with a possibility of a couple of other homes entering the pilot. We had an open application process. Homeowners are actually applying to be part of this. And we're hoping that in about 6 months we'll have our first Resilience Star homes, and that will then lead to not just a pilot but really a full-scale application of the process. This slide, again, I've lost my caption here, but many of you, the words on this page may sound familiar to you, may look familiar to you, because they actually come from President Obama's recent order with respect to the Executive Order 13653 on adaptation in the climate change context. And obviously, the amount of money that he's asking for would be a great, great asset to those of us who are involved in the adaptation part of climate change. But I think what was equally important was the way in which he articulated the goals that he has for the fund, and how important these types of goals and activities really are to achieving what we're trying to accomplish here in adaptation. He talked about removing barriers to investment. Again, that's sort of part of that, the marketplace part of that, making investors understand that these really are sound investments. This isn't just sort of doing this for the sake of feeling good about the environment. These are sound investment strategies that will yield dividends over the long term, particularly with buildings that are supposed to be here for many, many years as the climate changes and we experience a lot of severe weather. We want to do two things in the next two bullets. One is support the things that are good and begin to reform the things that increase vulnerability. And so often there are such incentives to building in areas that are ever more vulnerable to wind and water, and at the same time sort of ignoring some of the things that really over the long term make more sense. I mentioned before that all of our organizations are about research and the development of new technologies, and that is part of that executive order as well. And I think finally sort of create a central point where these discussions can take place within the administration, and then most importantly within the community at large, and in every community should be aware of what can be done to increase adaptation. So I'm going to stop here. I know we've got a half hour left, and I hope we'll have a lot of chance for questions and discussion, because I know all the panelists that preceded me had an awful lot of interesting things to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. That was fantastic, and a great way to sort of summarize the previous talks as well.